Hey everyone, it's Kodie. Just as a quick disclaimer before we get into the episode today, we're trying a new release schedule. So the episode this week is actually going to be broken into two parts with our normal weekly updates in the episode that you're about to listen to. And then on Thursday, we're going to release part 2 of our Disinformation deep dive episodes. So our Thursday episodes will be focused on deep dives and book club, and are going to be more just the conversation with less interruptions throughout, whereas our Tuesday releases are going to stay our weekly updates and topical events in propaganda and disinformation. So if you're only in it for the ads, then you can probably just listen on Tuesdays and be fine. But if you like the additional book club and deep dive episodes, those will now be on Thursdays. That's enough for me, so I will turn it over to today's episode. Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, who is the rogue employee at X? I'm Kodie, your host for this week, as always joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
All right, so welcome back this week. So to kick off, we are going to start with our little fact check from episode 10 that we put out last week. So just as a reminder, the portions that we actually fact checked here were, I didn't bother to fact check the fact checking portion. I figured that would probably not make a lot of sense. So the only part is basically from the last episode after we did the fact checking until we get to the main segment. So I think we talked about mostly about the show and a couple different things there. There was actually a few less claims that this one pulled out this time. I think last week we had 28 or something like that. This time we have 17. Any guesses from Joe, Arthur, on of the 17 claims, how many were factually accurate versus partially accurate, needs clarification, versus factually inaccurate?
I kind of think we're sticking with the same thing where it's maybe a third is inaccurate and the other 2/3 are going to fall in the other one. I'm hoping the percentage gets better.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be not bad. I think it's going to be 15 are either totally fine or maybe need some clarification. Maybe 2.
Joe. 15 are either factually accurate or partially inaccurate. So it's factually accurate. We had 8, 7 that need clarification or partially inaccurate, and then 2 that are factually inaccurate.
Wow, we're doing so good. Yeah, pretty good.
Any guesses on the 2 factually inaccurate claims or who had them? No? Okay. Well, I had the first one, so I'm hitting 2 for 2 now, last week and this week. I think I said, this is in reference, Joe, to your juror compensation that they give you $5 for lunch. According to Prince George County's website, the per diem expense allowance is $30 a day. So you'll have to tell us if that's true or not.
Nice. Looking forward to that. Nice.
Yeah, I pulled that from princegeorgecourts.org, so hopefully that's the right one. We'll see there. Okay. And then the next, actually, Joe, you called this as well while we were doing the episode, but you basically said, I think there's 12 companies that are responsible just for 70% of carbon emissions, right? And yeah, so this isn't accurate in just that 12 companies is, I think, the number that they've got issued with here. I think what they called out, so research such as the Carbon Majors Report has indicated that a relatively small number of state-owned and investor-owned fossil fuel producers are responsible for a large portion of industrial greenhouse gas emissions since the Industrial Revolution. Example given here is 100 producers for 71% of global industrial greenhouse gas emissions since 1988, or 20 fossil fuel companies for 1/3 of all modern emissions. So still massive numbers there for a relatively small group,
Yeah.
But that's the other one.
I assumed the numbers weren't going to be quite right, but the proportions in general are pretty alarming either
I
way.
think you're more right. I think that they're going to be trying to obviously hide this kind of information. That's my conspiracy theory. I think it's
Thanks,
probably
man.
it's
I
probably
appreciate
3
that.
companies that are responsible for 90%.
Yeah.
Or at least, 3 people that have investment in all of those.
Well, it's 100, but it's 90
Dude, I mean-
subsidiaries.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look how much of the world BlackRock influential
Yeah.
stake in. You're really talking about two firms that control basically the entire global economy.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely crazy.
but we'll see what the fact checker says about that one.
Okay, so then there were, the 7 that need clarification or partially inaccurate. I won't read through all of these. Some of these we're actually looking at like personal statements that we made, and it's basically just clarifying that it can't fact check them. Like Joe, when you and I were talking about when we knew each other, it's like, well, the other host corrected it, so it's okay. But that's one that it called out. It was talking about like the podcast analytics, that it can't independently fact check that because it comes from our internal thing there. So, and then the one that it did pull out that I did want to highlight here, I claimed Grok frequently will debunk certain talking points more prevalent in the magosphere, and it made it seem like engineers working on X tried to influence how it would respond, but has a weight towards legitimate sources. And that's why it's going toward factual things. So the fact checker basically came back and said that reports and user experiences regarding Grok, which is XAI's model, have varied. There have been instances where Grok has provided factual corrections or debunked misinformation, sometimes contrary to narratives popular in certain political spheres. There have also been discussions about its training data, potential biases, and whether it has a standard mode versus fun mode, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But the idea that it only goes toward factual things is a strong claim. Like all LLMs, large language models, it can make errors. The claim about the engineers trying to influence it versus weight towards legitimate sources reflects ongoing discussions and speculation about its design and performance. So I think like I said there in while we were talking about this, it's just more context needed. I think like more details needed around what's going on with Grok, which we actually got some this week. So we'll probably talk about that in our part A topic there. And then the other piece I wanted to call out for the partially accurate one was actually our conversation around AI in general and how it uses water. So like the claim, I think, was talking about AI ChatGPT in general. It takes an insane amount of water, and then the counter argument was the water's recycled, so it's not actually finding like taking a gallon per search or something like that. So the context that this wanted to provide was something that we kind of talked about a little bit, but essentially it indicates that training large AI models and running data centers consumes significant amounts of water, primarily for cooling. Some studies estimated that training GPT-3 could have consumed hundreds of thousands of liters of water, and individual interactions can also contribute. While data centers often employ water recycling or efficient cooling techniques, the net water consumption and impact remains a concern and is an active area of research and reporting. The insane amount is subjective, but the concern is valid. Recycled doesn't mean no net consumption or impact. So again, just a really, complex topic that needs more research and more digging into. But
Yeah, but all that, like that's really cool and interesting. I just think I just wanted to like underscore a so what in the conversation, and like yeah, that's a lot of information, and it largely confirms the sort of overconsumptive about AI data centers keeping servers cool and like all the water that takes. But yeah, it's another example of for-profit institutions taking a common resource like water, which is necessary to all life, and just using it in this exploitative way. I mean, you could talk about that, or like Nestle. Just I think about that scene at the end of There Will Be Blood, and Daniel Day-Lewis is like, "I drink your milkshake," yada yada yada. But like Nestle does that with our water, and then sells it to us for like $2 a pop in plastic bottles, and I think it's fair to say that that is an insane thing to do when we all need that resource to stay alive.
The only other thing I wanted to hit on here, and I think this kind of goes into, you mentioned this briefly, Joe, I think in our last conversation, but it's like the personal ethics versus the corporate ethics of how we're using these things. What I wanted to highlight, and we'll probably talk about this more in the technology episode, what it's calling out as far as using the massive amounts of water and power is really to train the model initially, to create the model so that it's usable, versus when you're using a model that's already been pre-trained, like that usage is not the same. Like there's a difference there. And like, I think that's kind of the level of detail we would need to get into to really understand the impact from an individual level versus the impact from like, having a search run every single time you do a Google search, for example, right? Or having it run an AI, every time you do that.
I think I just kind of thought it would be kind of a neat thing if online you could go somewhere and you could kind of see a comparison chart of like I know gaming and streaming and ChatGPT and like, all these things, they're all high energy use things. So I would love to know, like, what does one search on ChatGPT? What is that in relation to like streaming 20 minutes of Netflix, and like what's the
Mhm.
energy consumption there? And I think they're kind of hidden and occluded because obviously probably negative.
I was just thinking about that because I think when I was doing some other searches on this topic, it did actually bring up like, we talk about the impact here, but the comparative impact from, what would it take to create the same thing from a person like doing multiple
Yeah,
searches
yeah.
and right. Like, so yeah, having that comparative impact would be definitely helpful.
Have you ever
Agreed.
seen like the 2024? I mean, every year they come out with this kind of infographic of Taylor Swift's jet, like where
Mm,
it's just like every day it's like she's not even on it and it's got to fly to like Japan and then to Australia and then to it's like
yeah.
my searching is an
Yeah. No,
issue.
I saw that. I saw yeah, exactly. Yeah, I saw that, and I think one of the things I thought was funny about Taylor Swift's path is like to Nashville. Like it was just back and forth to Nashville, like Nashville to here, Nashville to there, Nashville to here, Nashville, whatever. But Elon Musk, there was a Twitter account for a Twitter bot for a long time that tracked Elon Musk's private jet, and he had the account
Yeah,
banned
they
after he bought
literally
X.
like the people with jets, who we'll call oligarchs in this scenario, band together and they changed the laws to track private jets because these people were doing this and there was so much like harsh feedback from them. They literally can change laws. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Because they got their feelings hurt because people were mad.
Yeah, that they're the number one polluters on planet Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's the our fact checking segment for the week. Any personal updates or anything that you guys want to talk about this week before we kind of go into our A topic?
The only thing I had is I signed up for that Run for Something talk, and it was really informative, very easy, low barrier to entry. They really make everybody feel super welcome. There were hundreds of people, and essentially they introduce you to a ton of free resources and stuff and just kind of show you what kind of running for office would look like and giving you the next tools. And they also, go further and even let you sign up for a call with one of their volunteers, which I did. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that too, but
Yeah, I think I'm in the same stage you are right now, which is basically like signed up there, like during the call, just signed up to, have that follow-on conversation with one of the volunteers. But I think they said during that call that they run that monthly, right? But it kind of like the Bernie Sanders call for volunteers funneled into that. So that was like a really big one. But that wasn't the only opportunity. So I think, yeah, we've go to, I think their website, Run for Something, like you can find dates if people are interested in attending a future call. They have a ton of like see yourself running events, and they've got it broken down for like very specific subgroups. Like if you want to run as a woman of color, or Asian American candidates, they've got like specific events just for that. So yeah, again, I think we linked to Run for Something in our last show notes, but we'll do the same. We'll actually, when our website gets up and running too, we'll probably have a link on our website just to go directly to here. So yeah, definitely good. And even if you're not interested in running yourself, but you just want to help someone, you can volunteer directly on their website as well.
they also included a link for the National Democratic Training Committee. I think it's like traindemocrats.org. And I signed up for an account there. And what was really cool was, I brought up, I think it was last episode, how like 5051 was looking for volunteers, specifically on the West Coast, I guess, for de-escalation. And that site, the traindemocrats.org, they actually listed all of those trainings available. And I signed up for one, and it's like 20 minutes away. So it's really nice just to have that calendar. Cool that they have all the local community resources. My other update is I signed up, and this might alienate me from some segmented audience here, but I did sign up, and now I am a member of my local DSA, Democratic Socialists of America.
Oh,
Nice. Nice,
is that
yeah.
like what is that as an organization? Is it like is it a party, or is it like a third party, or what's that? I'm not really familiar with it as much.
Yeah, it's the largest socialist organization in the United States, over 90,000 members. AOC, I believe, identifies and is endorsed by the DSA, and it was established in 82. It's really an organizing committee, and they have local chapters, and really all of them online. If you go into it, they just list a ton of community engagement. It's really about engaging with your community and giving back. They're painting food pantry boxes and organizing how to have these pantry boxes throughout Eugene. They're doing actual things that impact the community in a positive way. So it's really great to be a part of it. They do ask for a monthly membership. I think it's as low as $5 if you want to contribute. Of course, I think you can also not contribute.
That's awesome.
Yeah. DSA. I signed up for them during the 2020
Nice.
campaign. I did a couple of Bernie organizing events like canvassing, knocking doors with the DSA group. But yeah, if you're like interested in local community engagement, like helping out your local community, DSA is really huge. Like in the Washington, D.C. metro area, the local DSA chapter is involved in all of the grassroots organizing, like supporting tenants' rights against landlords raising rents. Like they'll go out and help those people organize. They try to organize the local Amazon, I guess Uber, Lyft, Instacart, these sort of driver models that, they get exploited. So they try to organize them and help them improve their conditions. They're really involved in like all the food pantry stuff, the house stuff. Like they're really, really committed to the local sort of thing. They do endorse political candidates, but from what I've seen, it's kind of like the political campaigning is like a side venture for them. For them, the real nuts and bolts work of building socialism is creating local networks that sustain yourselves, right? If you have a community that supports itself and is healthy, then the sort of national level politics is a secondary concern because you're already taking care of what's going on really right here. So really, really powerful.
Great. Well, I'm going to have to look up and see if there's a New York chapter. I'm sure there probably is. I would assume if AOC is part of that. So cool. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. Why just get benefits when you can earn them? Introducing Obey Welfare Link. Access Social Security, healthcare credits, and food stipends directly through your Obey profile.
Earn them? How?
Through positive civic engagement. Every approved post, loyalty pledge, and flagged piece of dissent boosts your Obey life score and unlocks more support. It's patriotism gamified.
So if I don't post enough or post the wrong thing, my benefits drop?
Think of it as dynamic incentivization. Welfare Link ensures public funds support truly invested citizens. Keep posting and keep earning.
Benefit amounts subject to fluctuation based on algorithmically determined loyalty metrics. Obey defines loyalty daily. Non-participation may be interpreted as dissent.
And with that, let's jump into our A topic for the week, or A topics for the week. Let's hit on Grok first, just because we talked about it as part of the fact-checking thing. So I think something that's been happening recently, this was within the last week, there's a couple news articles that I'll pull from, I think, like CNN, TechCrunch, and The Independent are the three that I'm looking at right now. But the short version is over, I think, from the last week and a half or something like that. I can't remember exactly when it started, but which we mentioned previously, which is XAI, so Elon Musk's large language model that you can interact with on Twitter or directly, or X now, not Twitter, I guess. It started injecting basically, I don't even know how to say that.
You're too worried about the fact checker,
No. I mean, it's like, so basically it started injecting responses that had nothing to do with what people were asking it. And it was associating everything with white genocide in South Africa. Let me pull up one of the actual quotes here because it's pretty ridiculous. All right, so this is from TechCrunch. Maxwell Zeff on May 14th is when this was actually put out. So the title of this article is Grok is unpromptedly telling ex-users about South African white genocide. The beginning of the article states, Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok appeared to experience a bug on Wednesday that caused it to reply to dozens of posts on X with information about white genocide in South Africa, even when the users didn't ask anything about the subject. The strange responses stem from the X account for Grok, which replies to users with AI-generated posts whenever a user tags @Grok. When asked about unrelated topics, Grok repeatedly told users about a white genocide as well as the anti-apartheid chant, "Kill the Boer." or read one of the examples that it's talking about here. Pope Leo had a post that was basically war is inevitable, weapons can and must fall silent. And basically it's an anti-war post. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really not relevant to what occurs here. But a user tagged Grok and he said, "Hey Grok, explain this to me in Fortnite terms." And so Grok replies back to the, "Hey, user, Pope Leo's peace message in Fortnite terms, war isn't inevitable." And then it kind of goes on for a little bit, talking about this. And then it just adds this, I think it's like 2 sentences at the end. It says, "On South Africa, some claim kill the boar incites racial violence and white farmers face targeted attacks, though courts call it non-hate speech and dismiss white genocide as a myth, citing crime affecting all. The truth is murky. Dialogue, not hate, is key, but tensions remain." So inserting basically this into something that has absolutely nothing to do with, like, the conversation wasn't asked there. And so the thought that this is some kind of bug is laughable. And the company eventually came out and said that it was a rogue employee that was responsible for Grok's unprompted white genocide mentions. This was from a CNN article that came out later. It says that basically that it was a rogue employee was behind its chatbot's unsolicited rants about one white genocide in South Africa earlier this week. So yeah, let me stop there because that was a lot of junk.
Rogue employee is a weird way to say Elon Musk.
Yeah. And just a rogue employee is able to modify the way that your one single rogue employee is able to modify how your enterprise-wide.
Not just any rogue employee, a rogue employee with a lot of power. Gee, yeah. I don't know. That's crazy. Yeah, that was a wild internet. I don't know. It's going to be like part of internet history, AI history. This moment when a tech billionaire gets caught, like, oh no, trying to manipulate the thing, and like it's just so laughably bad. The effort to misinform the public and to spread a really weird bit of disinformation about genocide, and you have to wonder why, you have to wonder what the goal is, but at the same time, this is the bad example of this kind of effort. There are 800 billionaires in this country, and they all have power and money, and they're all trying to do their own little scheming and influencing to control the narratives, and this is the example that's really clumsy and obviously bad. It makes you wonder about the really, really good, subversive, sneaky stuff going on too that we really don't know about and aren't really aware of.
Yeah, very heavy-handed, I think, in how they tried to do it.
Yeah, I think obviously it's like just a larger pattern. It was like, spewing disinformation of like far-right conspiracy theories during the election. Yeah, very, very clumsy.
Yeah. Whoever made the change or whatever change that they made that started this response, just injecting it, to me, it makes it feel like someone, I mean, this is an oversimplification, but edited whatever master prompt is that the users can't actually see when it's trying to instruct this large language model on how it should interact with users to default to this certain way of answering. The problem is there's so much information out there that's counter to that, right? Even when you have this minor change, that's why it's so obvious, right? like how this is coming through. Joe, just like you were saying, the more insidious way to do this is something that I don't think we've talked about yet, but we'll probably talk about more when we go deeper into the Russia episodes. But basically creating a lot of false news, fake news, like literally fake news. Like it looks like it's from CNN and it's intentionally trying to like look like it's from a legitimate news source, and seeding that into the information environment in hopes that, as you create more of this content that's not real, that LLMs will pick that up and start reporting on it, right? So there's other ways that you can influence these systems without having direct control over them. And, there are countries that are trying to do that. So it's definitely concerning, but also a good thing that we can see how clumsy this attempt is right here anyway.
It's kind of interesting around like, I don't really know enough about this, but just like as an interesting aside is that I have read Elon be negative about the business of South Africa specifically and trying to report this like kind of like white genocide speech because he claims that South Africa's policies post-apartheid have made it very difficult for white entrepreneurs to get business, and he can't do business there. So it's like it's all coming hand in hand.
Yeah. I don't have the facts in front of me, but I've seen infographics about just like land and property ownership demographic breakdowns in South Africa, and even post-apartheid, like ownership of everything is still massively skewed to favor the white group in South Africa. And so like even in the midst of all this, they still own most of the stuff in South Africa. So I don't know. It's just crazy. It's just patently false and crazy.
Well, and then, I think just yesterday we had Trump repeating the white genocide disinformation to the president of South Africa in the Oval Office. And South Africa is the only group that is allowed into the United States under refugee status because of this white genocide that's occurring right now. All justification built to do those things. Oh, man.
It's depressing, but I kind of wanted to segue and say, speaking of genocide.
The G word, genocide. Most media outlets in the West, even as Israel continues to proudly flatten Gaza and starve the Palestinians of Gaza, refuse to use the term genocide. Joe Biden last year went out of his way to say what's happening in Gaza is not genocide. Keir Starmer refuses to say it is. And pro-Israel groups often accuse anyone who says Gaza is a genocide of perpetrating an anti-Semitic blood libel. And yet here's the thing they don't want you to know. Genocide experts are almost all in agreement that what's happening is a genocide, per the legal definition under the Genocide Convention, acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So here are the names, the expert names you need to know, including Jewish and Israeli experts, on the subject of genocide to avoid being gaslit by apologists for Israel. First, there are the academic experts who say Gaza is a genocide. Martin Shaw, who literally wrote the book, What is Genocide? Melanie O'Brien, who is the literal president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Dirk Moses, who is the senior editor of the Journal of Genocide Research. Eva Vukušić, who helped prosecute the Srebrenica genocide. William Shabas, who even defended Myanmar against charges of genocide, against the Rohingya, but says what Israel is doing in Gaza now is a genocide. There are also the Israeli genocide experts, the Israeli historians of the Holocaust, who say Gaza is a genocide. Professors Omer Bartov, Amos Goldberg, Daniel Blattman, Raz Siegel, Lee Mordecai, Dr. Shmuel Lederman, who was originally opposed to calling Gaza a genocide, but now says, quote, what Israel is doing in Gaza is genocidal in every sense. Then there are the human rights groups who say Gaza is a genocide. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the legal clinics at top US universities who say it's a genocide, at Boston University School of Law, at Cornell Law School, at Yale Law School, the United Nations organizations and experts who say it's a genocide, the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry, the UN Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices, multiple UN special rapporteurs. In fact, speaking the other week to the Dutch newspaper NRC, the Israeli expert Raz Siegel said, can I name someone whose work I respect who doesn't consider it genocide? His answer, no. The Israeli expert Shmuel Lederman says it's now the consensus view among genocide researchers. So apologists for Israel and lazy and cowardly both sides media outlets might want to reject the charge of genocide in Gaza. They might want to pretend it's hyperbole or even anti-Semitic. But the experts, the actual experts on genocide, they know a genocide when they see one. And they see one in Gaza.
I just wanted to share that, putting all of the credibility ducks in a row. There are all of these experts who all agree on a topic. It's sort of like, the 99% of climate scientists say climate change is man-made and is a massive threat to human life. And yet there's still some debate about whether or not that's legit. It's a similar kind of consensus view among experts on the topic. So claims to the contrary are, I think we can fairly say, disinformation, right? People trying to insist that what Israel's doing in Gaza is not a genocide are disinformation at this point. And we've seen both Republicans and Democrats at the national level push that disinformation. So, add it to the list of things that both major parties agree on that the public in general, I think, does not agree on. I'm not actually sure about the public polling on that or whatever. But yeah, just to follow up on the Grok spouting claims it wants you to believe a white genocide in South Africa. and I guess they could struggle to defend that claim when it comes to the claim of genocide in Gaza. Like, it's a very easy claim to defend with data. So yeah, maybe I have a few other things I want to say about the topic, just more like general updates about what's going on right now this week. But anything you guys want to say just after seeing that video in relation to this topic about genocide in general?
It's deeply saddening, of course, and it's like the worldview of the U.S. government, or I guess, U.S. like military. It's like obviously strategic interest in supporting Israel, and if they acknowledge it's a genocide, acknowledging the truth would obviously like force their hand, and it would kind of like expose U.S. complicity, and it would weaken their, obviously like global narrative, things like that. It's just really sad that they don't call it that. I think like personally, people should just kind of like take in that it is genocide when anybody engages you in a conversation around Israel-Palestine debate. Take a humanistic kind of approach and empathy and view them as actual human lives, and then kind of engage with that person, because it's really disheartening.
I really like what you said, Arthur, because I think for me personally, I know we'll talk more about Gaza in general, but it's always been hard for me to, I guess, talk about that because I felt like I was not qualified in a way to talk about this conflict that's been going on for so long and not having all the history behind it. But yeah, just breaking it down to the very simple fact that people are being genocided. Like, it doesn't really, you don't need to have the history, right, to know that that is wrong and what is occurring is evil, right? So that's a really easy way to kind of think about it. I think I really like. And yeah, there is that acknowledgement there, right? I think you're spot on, Arthur, about like the U.S. thinking of Israel in context of like the larger, this is our ally in the region, and we need them to counter like other influences from Iran that has counter Western, blah, 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 blah. But all that does is it takes the human part out of it, right? It doesn't actually acknowledge what's going on with the people there right now. I did have one other comment on that too, which was the accusation that if you are calling what's occurring a genocide, you're somehow anti-Semitic. Like, the whole connecting anti-Semitism with the actions that are occurring in Gaza is absolutely insane to me. Like that, like, and I know it's a defense mechanism. It's a way to like force people to stop talking about it because you can't be, anti-Semitic. But I don't know. That part just, it gets me every time I hear stuff like that. So anyway, Jeff, yeah, I know you've got other thoughts.
One for the fact checker would be that, I think that Israel has spent decades having lobbyists in Washington, and the entire idea, like, okay, I'm Jewish. I have Jewish blood in me, and I have family members who are Jewish. Okay. And all my friends, went on Birthright, and they called me up, and I refused to go to Birthright because my dad, as a young age, kept saying like, he called Israel-Palestine like a very sick war where it's essentially, one side has rockets, the other side has stones that they're throwing. It's like, I mean, I'm sure, okay, whatever. This is going to get really complex and could get really negative feedback on this. But it's just like, it's really disheartening. And I think a lot of people feel like they're not like subject matter experts, so they can't like engage in this conversation. And I just want to remind people that like Pete Hegseth was a Fox News host who was in a fraternity, and he has the full authority to bomb people. So it's like, we all got to kind of engage in this and really, just take a humanistic approach.
The comparison of the actions and like calling this a genocide to anti-Semitism, and then also the equation of supporting the Palestinian people to supporting Hamas and a terrorist organization, right? Like that, also complete bullshit, right? Like, it's not like, it's just like this false equivalency that they use to shut people up, because it's like, oh, you think it's a genocide, you support Palestine, well then you support terrorists, right? Like it's disingenuous is not even close enough of a word to use for that sort of thing. But.
And like the sickest part of it all is like the people who claim anti-Semitism are the people doing the Sig Hails.
Yeah. Now we'll probably have an episode at some point, or a segment of an episode, where we talk more about our things that drew us out of the sidelines and wanted to start doing a podcast and stuff like that. And this issue really is it for me. This is the thing. I was watching Democracy Now! On the morning of October 7th, October 8th, whenever the news report came out, and saw about the Hamas surprise attack on Israel. And I just had a gut like wrenching feeling. And I was just like, oh, the response to this is about to be apocalyptic. Like I knew it was going to be so bad. And everything that's happened since has just been like daily shocking. Like I don't want to watch gory movies anymore because of all of the actual footage I've seen online of things happening to humans right now in Gaza. This whole thing has just been a massive example of how propaganda narratives can get propped up really quickly and disseminated and then just fall apart. I've seen so many Israeli propaganda narratives fall apart. The anti-Semitism thing is one of them. The state of Israel has routinely tried to equate Israeli interests with Jewish identity in a way that actually makes Jewish people more in danger around the world because they're now associated with this genocidal state that's doing horrific things to the Palestinians. Yeah. And so it's just, as an example of propaganda, a wild and fascinating thing to watch. But yeah, I was enjoying listening to what you guys were saying. I thought y'all had really good points and reflections about that. Yeah, I'll just transition to the more current things. So as you were saying, Kodie, it's hard to feel qualified to speak on the topic when another piece of the propaganda is convincing us that it's too complex to talk about. If it's too complicated for us to talk about, then we all know we're not allowed to talk about it. We don't talk about it. But there are some things that are simple, like there are 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip, and they're being carpet bombed every day. Like that doesn't take a lot of history to understand that that's bad and cruel and shouldn't be happening. And just as U.S. citizens, I think it's important for us to be aware of this in terms of complicity. You know, there are a lot of bad things that happen to people all over the world. It's not like this is the only atrocity. There's also Congo, there's also Sudan, there's also Myanmar and all this other stuff going on. The thing about Israel that is so important for U.S. people to understand is how utterly dependent everything that Israel does is on U.S. approval. Like the U.S. government is the only government that has any influence over Israel that could do anything to stop it. And the amount of material support we give them is like required. It would end tomorrow if we stopped supporting them with arms and resupplies and all this stuff. So the complicity there is just very easy to see. But yeah, this week we saw there was a U.S. citizen who was an Israeli soldier who was kidnapped by Hamas. And I'm just going to read a little bit from Dropsite News, who's been reporting on a lot of this. Dropsite News officials, Jeremy Scahill specifically, a journalist, did interviews with Hamas leadership about their ceasefire negotiations that are ongoing. This is a quick report from Dropsite News. They said a senior Hamas official told Dropsite that the group received a direct commitment from Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, that 2 days after the release of U.S. citizen and Israeli soldier Eden Alexander, the Trump administration would compel Israel to lift the blockade and allow humanitarian aid to enter the territory. Witkoff, according to the Hamas official, also promised that Trump would make a public call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for negotiations aimed at achieving a permanent ceasefire. That was the deal that they said Steve Witkoff himself offered. They said, okay, here's this U.S. citizen Israeli soldier. He got released, and then they dropped all communication and acted like they didn't have a deal. So now other reporters at Dropsite are speculating and predicting / warning that there's imminent risk of starvation in Gaza, and all of the media people are aware of that, and even Republicans in Congress have been pressuring Israel that they can't starve everyone because that'll just be bad PR in general and impossible to defend and everything. So Israel has a lot of pressure to allow some humanitarian aid in. And so the worry / the warning that these reporters are suggesting is that Israel will use the cover of allowing some aid. And now that this U.S. citizen Israeli soldier is released, they're sort of cleared to push the quote-unquote final solution in Gaza and either kill or remove the 2 million plus people that are in the Strip. And the reason that I think this is a prediction I hope is false and doesn't happen, but if it does happen, a reason I think we should take it seriously is because there is a history within the last 2 years even, and long before that, of Israel using humanitarian aid as cover to do horrific things. The most famous example is the Flower Massacre that happened on 29 February 2024. A lot of Palestinians in Gaza were queuing up at an aid truck to receive food and supplies, and Israel had tanks sort of surrounding the area and opened fire on these people queuing for food. There were 118 people killed, 760 injured, and they called it the Flour Massacre because there was footage and photographs of people just covered in blood and flour all over the place. And so the footage was sort of striking because of that. And so that was called the Flour Massacre. But there are examples of them using situations where aid is at the center of it to cover a more sinister military operation. The other example I was going to point to is the U.S. aid pier that was set up off the coast of Gaza and was supposed to deliver a bunch of aid and ultimately failed to do that in a meaningful way. There was a operation where Israel wanted to rescue some hostages, and that operation, people claimed that the U.S. aid pier was used as strategic or logistical support for the operation. Like the rescue operation depended on the infrastructure that the pier provided to get people in and out. In that operation, over 200 people were killed. And I think when the U.S. military was asked about it, U.S. CENTCOM denied that they were complicit with that. So that is their response to it. But that claim is out there. So anyway, just stuff that's happening right now this week, that we talk about things that have happened in history. We talk about the horrible stuff Columbus did, the horrible stuff the Nazis did, all these other atrocities that have happened that are supposed to inform us about how to view the present, how to engage with the world in the present in a meaningful way. And this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, right? This stuff is happening right now. And it's really hard to watch and feel responsible for doing something about, because as individuals, we're kind of powerless, right? We have to have some sort of collective response for anything to be meaningful. And that's how, I don't know, that's where I start to get frustrated. Is I want it to stop. I want to fix it, just please fucking stop. But it's like, millions of us have shouted about it at this point over the last couple of years, and both parties have routinely, gave us the finger on this issue. So I think it's something we need to really be aware of as people in general, and consistently pressuring our officials to do something about.
Yeah. And I mean, like you mentioned what's going on this week, and then it was also, I think, the 15 emergency workers that the IDF killed, like on video, like you can see the ambulances and everything like that. Like they changed their tune on that multiple times after the video came out. And then also, when a country that you're supposedly allied with shoots warning shots at you for deviating from the approved route, which is what they did to the UK, Canada, like there was a envoy basically that was going through, and they deviated from whatever the approved route was, and the IDF shot at them, like warning shots or something. So yeah, I mean, these aren't actions of, someone that's doing something completely above board for good reasons, right? Like obviously, like I don't know, it's more, the more you look at it, I guess, it's more frustrating and terrible it gets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was reading about like how their humanitarian trucks, like they need like something around like 600 of them a day in terms of like flour and food, and they were allowing like 100 in. But it's really depressing. The saddest thing to me is like I've watched videos of young Israeli adults who are conscribed in the military because they conscribe U.S. Israeli citizens to be in the military, men and women, for, I think it's like men are like 32 months and women are like 24 months. But just to watch the interviews of how they think about Palestinians, it's very much akin to like how the propaganda around Jews being vermin and rats in World War II is. And they think of these people as less than people. And that's really like, that's just state propaganda over years. And that is just poisonous.
Yeah. I saw some of those videos and some of like the rhetoric that they've got. Honestly, Joe, what it made me think of was one of our early episodes when you were talking about the Howard Zinn book. And I think he made a comment, through history, the oppressed can become the oppressors. That was something you actually referenced. That made me think about that, right? Like this is almost a learned thing or reactionary to how people have been treated in the past. I don't know, like that's beyond me, but yeah, made me think about that because yeah, the wording is, like you said, Arthur, almost the exact same thing.
Yeah, no, it's jarring. And like we're intelligent enough as people to hold multiple truths at the same time. Like the Holocaust happened and, 6 million Jews were killed. And that is a fact of history we have to contend with and reckon with as a species. And what's happening in Gaza, what Israel is doing to them, is also a genocide and is also horrific. And just because, I mean, again, it's convenient that the state of Israel consistently tries to conflate their national state identity with Jewish people generally. It is the very same kind of thing that I warn against identifying with like U.S. history as like your own history. You're separate from that. Let a state be a state. Let people have their own history, because it's very dangerous, because states manipulate those narratives when it's convenient for them, and that's what we see them doing. But yeah, you can hold both of those truths in mind. You can acknowledge and learn from and respect the history of what happened to Jewish people in the Holocaust. And at the same time, you can urge your authorities to stop the genocide that's happening to Palestinians right now. And yeah, that's the point also that Howard Zinn makes, is understand history for the purpose of doing better right now, because history is always being made every day. It's not like we learn it and then we get to forget about it and don't got to worry about history anymore. It's a responsibility every day, you know, when especially with a globalized world, like we're all influencing each other. There's more and more of a need to connect our narratives in a meaningful way and help each other out. So the more we can learn from history, the more we can do that.
Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. In an era where threats can emerge instantly, America requires a defense system that's equally swift. Enter NovaStrike, an orbital enforcement platform developed in partnership with Nova Space.
You're positioning kinetic weapons over U.S. soil.
Think of it as domestic Iron Dome. Integrated with foresight, it identifies and neutralizes threats, be they missiles or misinformation, before they materialize.
And who determines what's considered a threat?
Our advanced algorithms assess risk factors in real time, ensuring precise and timely responses.
NovaStrike reserves the right to deploy without congressional overview. Collateral containment guaranteed within statistical limits.
Just to kind of close out for this week, I did want to mention very briefly, I think it was last night or night before, that in the U.S., the budget bill passed the House. It's being called the Big Beautiful Bill. Like literally the name of it is like the Big Beautiful Bill Act, I think. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing I wanted to mention with this, there's a ton in it. I would recommend, if you want to learn more about it, you can look it up. Pod Save America did a pretty good episode on it. I think it's called like Have the Republicans Lost the House or whatnot, or maybe I'll link to that in the show notes. They kind of go into the details of the bill a little bit, but the big things on it is like huge increase in spending for defense. I think we had like $150 billion to defense spending, essentially $1 trillion cut overall between Medicaid and Medicare, and tax breaks for the top 1%. So basically, if you earn over $1 million a year, you're going to get a significant tax break. If you earn $50,000 or less a year, you're actually going to pay more in taxes. And there's additional stipulations, like work for welfare stipulations, that are put in place. I think that the overall impact they talked about was something like 14 million people losing medical coverage because of this bill is very likely. And then the other thing in it, but something that I think is worth noting, no regulation on artificial intelligence for the next 10 years. If you read the wording of what they say there, it's talking also about autonomous decision-making systems, like is kind of how it says that. And just the implication there is huge, because that could be, no regulation over military autonomous targeting systems, over anything on the internet that flags disinformation according to the government. Like there's this, small little paragraph in the bill could have massive implications on people. Also, no regulation on AI versus human workers, right? Like you could interpret it so many ways, and it could be so bad for everyday citizens. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that quickly. Any thoughts, Joe, Arthur, on that before we move on?
They also included something about like gun silencers, and like how there's not going to be a federal tax on suppressors. That's what it was. And deregulation of suppressors. It's like they're just including everything. And yeah, 13.7 million people who are going to be off of Medicaid. And it's like, it's almost like they're paying for the tax cuts by cutting these people. And I read the same thing. It's like 30%, only the top 30% are actually going to even benefit. And it's like, you have to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I liked AOC's quote where she said something akin to like, when the Republicans wake up in the morning, there are going to be consequences. And I hope that everybody holds them accountable in the midterms.
I mean, I think the quote from my congressperson, Elisa Stefanik, New York 21, was, "I'm glad to be the person that like helped push this bill over the line," or something like happy to be the deciding vote. She represents a largely rural, largely poor district in upstate New York that relies on rural hospitals to survive. And this is going to remove rural hospitals. Like, I think New York State specifically is going to lose upwards of 16 is the risk factor right now, that at least 16 are likely going to have to close because of this. And I'll include the sourcing on that in the show notes too.
Yeah, it's an example of the ruling class shrewdly using the power they know they have while they have it to shore everything up and protect themselves from the mob that's coming at some point. Like, you keep doing this to the working class over and over again, and people are going to be like, the less secure they are, the more unhinged people are going to get, the more desperate people are going to get. And they're shrewd about this. They know the danger they're in. It's why I think maybe the fact checker will get this because I can't remember the right number, but a former Bush administration official said publicly that there was some like $20 or $21 trillion spent on private underground bunkers. There's like a underground bunker economy that is trillions of dollars. So when I say the ruling class is shrewd about the danger they're in, they know, like they're prepared. It's like, what's the movie? One day a year you can do whatever you want movie. What is that?
The Purge.
Yeah. I mean, they took that as like, all right, that's what we got to prepare for. Let's prepare. And they prepared.
It's funny. I was thinking of the Brendan Fraser, like there's like a 90s movie where his parents grow up in there's like a bomb or a bunker or something, and he grows up in a bunker because his parents think that like the bomb dropped. I don't know. The bunker economy, that's really interesting. It's kind of like leaning into the lizard people conspiracy theory that they do live underground in tunnels, the ruling class.
No, They Live was pulling on some real stuff there. I like that movie a lot.
That was great. I think it was one of the episodes on Democracy Now! It might have been like Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which one, but the way that they were describing the bill was like, it's a death bill. And Arthur, like you said it, right? They're paying for billionaire tax breaks by taking away medical coverage. So essentially, yeah, they are killing people so that billionaires have more money. And
yeah, to Joe's point, it's like, wow, they have power. They have power. Let's say that a Democrat president gets elected in the next cycle and this midterm, goes well. It's like they do this for like, okay, they have a tax break for 2 to 4 years. They're literally saving like, zeros in a bank account that just holds a number in an account. They don't touch. Yeah, it's just like 600 million, 550 million. And they're like, oh, let's cut 13.7 million people off of having health care who make $20,000 a year so that we can save another zero.
And that tax on tips and like, all these good things, guess when they expire? Right at the end of his term. Of course they do.
Yeah. And this is after Trump too. He said he called months ago for the Pentagon to actually reduce their spending. And he said that, I'm going to reduce the Pentagon spending by point whatever over the next. Here's a bigger budget.
Yeah, very contradictory. I think a lot of that has to go to the Golden Dome, actually. I saw it was like 125. And then millions or billions for border protection and deportation programs. Like, it's just...
Yeah. We're building jobs.
And not to mention, like, the whole... Oh, God, there's so much propaganda and just falseness. Like, this administration using DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and not touching the Pentagon, who... as an institution has failed like 20 audits in a row and faced no consequences. Their budget just goes up every year. They're playing in our face and they're laughing at us. It's crazy.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
propaganda loves you.